Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore the incredibly deep psychological themes of human duality found in Hermann Hesse's literary masterpiece, Narcissus and Goldmund. Now, right off the bat, I want to clarify something. This is absolutely not just some dusty story about medieval monks studying in a cloister. It is a profound psychological mirror for literally anyone who has ever felt torn between two different versions of themselves. We're talking about identity, about repression, and about the terrifying yet totally beautiful process of discovering who you actually are.
So, let me ask you something right out of the gate to kind of bridge the gap between this classic literature and our own modern lives. Are you ruled by the logic of your mind or the wildness of your heart? It's a huge question, right? And it's one we all wrestle with at some point. Hesse brilliantly uses his two title characters to explore these exact opposing forces that honestly live inside every single one of us. Section 1. Two antithetical natures. We kick things off at the Maria Braun cloister, which sets the absolute perfect stage for this fundamental tension. Right outside the entrance to the cloister, Hesse drops this brilliant visual metaphor. He describes this gorgeous, sensual, completely exotic, sweet chestnut tree. It was brought all the way over from Italy, and it stands there as a total outsider against the rigid red stone architecture of this very strict German monastery. It sways in the wind, it sprouts its leaves late, and it fills the air with this thick, pungent fragrance. This tree is essentially the untamed spirit of nature and the senses. It stands in total stark contrast to the highly disciplined, pious world of the monks inside. It's basically a botanical preview of the massive clash we're about to witness. And that brings us directly to the core juxtaposition of our two main guys. On one hand, we've got Narcissus. He's this brilliant young teacher, the ultimate analytical mind, and a strict ascetic who's basically fast-tracked to become an abbot. He represents reason, logic, and what Hesse refers to as the father heritage, a very structured world built entirely on intellect. Then, on the flip side, there's Goldmund. He's a brand new student, this dreamy, sensuous kid with the undeniable soul of an artist. He represents nature, emotion, and the mother heritage. They are complete and total opposites in every conceivable way, and yet they're inexplicably drawn to each other, forming a bond that ends up defining both of their lives. Section 2. The false destiny. Let's look at how Goldmund attempts to force himself into a life that completely betrays who he really is. The thing is, when Goldmund first arrives at Maria Braun, he doesn't actually know he's an artist. He was sent there by his cold, incredibly strict father. But he's not just there for a standard education, oh no. He's there to atone for the perceived sins of his mother, who had vanished. The source material tells us his mother was this wild, beautiful dancer who just couldn't be tamed and eventually left the family. His father, practically drowning in shame, suppresses every single memory of her. He forces Goldmund to live this false destiny just to wipe out his mother's supposed wickedness. I mean, just imagine the psychological weight of that. A kid forced to erase half of his own identity to carry the heavy shame of his father's broken heart. And the crazy part is, Goldmund genuinely believes he is meant for this ascetic life. He essentially decides, okay, my father wants me to lead the life of a monk, so I am going to do it. And he accepts this path with all his willpower. But as you might guess, forcing yourself to be something you're fundamentally not, it takes a massive psychological toll. Goldmund starts violently repressing his authentic, vibrant self. He gets these terrible, blinding headaches. He loses his radiant laugh. He even starts deteriorating physically and mentally. His true nature is quite literally being suffocated by this artificial, inherited goal. Section 3. Awakening the Mother Spirit. Things really start to accelerate here as we hit a major crisis point that completely shatters Goldmund's rigid worldview. Look, you can only bottle up your true nature for so long before it finds a way out, right? For Goldmund, that breaking point happens during a secret, completely forbidden midnight excursion to a nearby village with some older classmates. They sneak into a dim, quiet kitchen, and there, just a simple, fleeting kiss from a young girl with dark braids suddenly jolts Goldmund's repressed senses wide awake. It's a super tense moment. He feels like if he gives in, all his pious dreams will just be swallowed whole by sin. But that one single kiss triggers a massive internal breakdown. In just a second, his carefully constructed identity completely shatters into a million pieces. Let's trace how this breakdown happens, step by step. First up, midnight, the village escapade. The very next day, the emotional overload is so intense that Goldmund actually faints right in the middle of the cloister garden, totally terrified by these hallucinations of glaring animal heads.
Hours later, while he's recovering in the infirmary, he has a massive breakthrough. He finally remembers his mother. And guess who triggers this? Narcissus. Narcissus steps in, acting almost like a psychoanalyst, aggressively confronting Goldmund with the truth, telling him he's basically sleepwalking through life and deliberately burying his own childhood. Narcissus grounds all of Hesse's abstract ideas by clearly defining this whole dynamic for Goldmund. He lays out this concept of the mother heritage, forcing Goldmund to look at the emotional mother figure he had locked away. Narcissus basically says, look, you take your being from your mother's. Your home is the earth. Ours is the world of ideas. You sleep at the mother's breast. I wake in the desert. It's a harsh but absolutely brilliant intervention. Using pure, unadulterated logic, Narcissus forces Goldmund to realize he isn't a creature of the mind at all. He's a creature of the senses. And once Goldmund finally stops fighting it and embraces his true nature, his mind just floods with the most beautiful, chaotic imagery. The source material describes these incredible, wild dreams. We're talking smooth-swimming fish and flying birds darting around like thoughts, magic gardens with giant moist berries leaking warm juices, and this super powerful vision of himself sculpting tiny clay figures that suddenly grow into silent, monstrous giants marching right out into the world. This is the raw, untamed power of the artist waking up inside him. He's not confined to Greek letters and cold stone walls anymore. His soul is finally breathing, and his imagination is completely off the leash. Section 4. Sun and Moon. The dust finally settles, and we get this really beautiful philosophical resolution to their intertwined journeys. So after the absolute storm of Goldmund's awakening, these two friends have to figure out where they stand, especially now that they fully realize how vastly different they are. And this brings us to Narcissus's ultimate revelation. He tells Goldmund, "We are sun and moon, dear friend. We are sea and land. It is not our purpose to become each other, it is to recognize each other." He completely understands that they're complementary opposites. Goldmund doesn't need to force himself to be a scholar, and Narcissus doesn't need to try and be an artist. They aren't meant to mimic one another, they're meant to honor those differences. It's honestly just a profound statement on friendship, love, and radical self-acceptance. Section 5. Finding your true path. Let's bring all of these powerful literary themes right back to your everyday life. Because, Hesse isn't just writing about a couple of medieval monks here, he's writing about the psychological architecture of every single one of us. The absolute biggest takeaway from Hesse's masterpiece is that you have to honor your authentic self. Whether you align more with the logical, structured mind of a Narcissus or the passionate, wild soul of a Goldmund, neither path is inherently wrong. What is wrong, what causes us deep, deep psychological pain, is suffocating your true nature just to meet someone else's expectations, exactly like Goldmund almost did for his father. You've got to find the place where your unique gifts can actually take root and grow. So we're going to wrap up with this final provocative thought. Ask yourself right now, are you living an authentic life, or are you just playing a role written by someone else? Have you buried your own true nature just to fit in? I really hope this dive into Hermann Hesse's brilliant work challenges you to reflect on your own destiny. And more than that, I hope it leaves you hungry to explore the untamed depths of your own soul. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.